Okay, let's go ahead and unsolo that. Go to overhead group and listen to that. As you can hear, I can talk, man. What's going on here? As you can hear, the overhead group is sounding compressed and pretty, but it's working in the mix. And I did want that compression. I sort of like drums with a little bit of pump in the cymbals, but it would be better to just use the drum bus compression here, add some compressor here, and you would really have pumping cymbals. But I sort of wanted them to pump in themselves and not because of the kick and snare hits and stuff like that. So, and there's another reason why I'm compressing a whole lot here at minus 48 decibel on threshold. That's because the hi-hats are really loud compared to most other cymbals, really. So I had to pull the threshold down so I could compress the hi-hats when they were hitting. If they hit like up here, it's gonna be compressed downwards. And I have the low pass and high pass settings set up so that it only listens for frequencies above this 11K. And that's where my hi-hat is mostly. So this compressor is mostly just to dampen the hi-hat, and that's why the hi-hat sounds compressed. But actually, I think in the chorus where I'm playing cymbals, I don't think it's that bad. Yeah, we can see here it's compressing a lot, and we can hear it as well. So yeah, the cymbals are being compressed by a... that was a good fart. Nope, it was not. It was not a fart. But if I get a fart, I will make sure you hear one. Yeah, we can see here. We can see here it's compressing like minus 9 dB on the hi-hat. So I did manage to selectively compress the hi-hat there. EQing out the bass frequencies. I don't want the kick drum in my overhead, and I don't want too much of the snare ring. I had a weird tuning going on in my snare drum, and it was ringing here, so I had to locate that and remove it from the overheads. And here's the same thing. This is a more specialized ring filter out on the snare drum in my overheads. So basically what I'm doing here is just, I usually start off with this and I sweep it around to listen for extremely ringing frequencies. And be careful with this because it can damage your ears if you have a loud volume and you encounter a frequency peak. But also, everything is going to sound annoying when you do like this. It's going to sound really... well, we can try it. I'm just gonna go ahead and undo that. Yeah, as I just showed you, everything is gonna sound annoying when you sweep the frequency band like that. But well, you somehow gotta learn to distinguish between the natural sounds from the unnatural ones. You will hear a really prominent ring on the snare drum when you hit that frequency. Like, let's disable this one and listen again. Actually, I just realized this is not to remove the ring, it's to remove the whole snare drum as much as possible from the overhead without removing, while removing as little as possible from the actual cymbals. Listen once again to the snare drum in the overhead now. Okay, and then with this on. I mean, you can still hear the attack of the snare drum, but it sounds a lot more scooped now. And once again, without. That extra added mid in the overhead track from the snare, that added mid frequency is actually built up in the mix, and I had trouble with that. This is a result of that trouble, and that trouble was when I was trying to EQ my snare group, and I sort of removed a lot of mids, and when I thought like, what? I have removed like 8 decibels of mid frequencies. It still sounds like a wooden box. It sounds hollow, and that was because a lot of the mids were actually in the overhead track. So with this one on, I get a lot less mids in my overhead track, and then I just didn't need to do as much on the snare track anymore. And of course, this does affect the cymbals, but only a little bit. I mean, most of the cymbal register is here, up here. So anyway, let's continue now. Boot EQ MK2 again. It's not warming up the lows, obviously, because we have no lows here. But it does taper off some highs to remove some of the sizz sounds. And also shaping, I mean, this one does a lot. Now, my overhead track also, I was pretty unlucky with that. And I guess the condenser mics that I had, still the JJ Labs cheap China mics, those mics are probably pretty damn bad. So it sounds like this without the effects. I mean, this is totally unprocessed, and you can hear the kick drum, you can hear the snare. I mean, you actually hear the snare drum more than the cymbals. It's like an extra snare drum mic. So what this chain does is it tries to remove the snare drum as much as possible while emphasizing the cymbals and the actual purpose of the overhead mics, which is the cymbals in my case. Overhead mics are not only for cymbals, but it's like the entirety of the drum kit. You want some snare drum in there, and you do want some toms, and it creates a stereo image, and it creates the depth of the drums. But sometimes you can, if you have the channels for it, you can individually mic cymbals, and in that way gain more control over your mix and each cymbal. But I'm using the overheads mostly for the cymbals in this project, so as I said, I try to minimize the snare, maximize the cymbals, and just clean the sound out, clean it up. Once again, we have to listen without this now because I'm talking way too much. Okay, and then with this. And with this one off, only this EQ is off now. So I guess you can notice how harsh the sound is from the cymbals. It sounds like a chainsaw or something. And that's a result of the compression and EQing here. So this one is trying to, in here I'm trying to make it less harsh, and especially this frequency. I could probably pull this down to like -10 and make it sound a bit better, but I'm just gonna leave it at -8 now. As I said, this does sound okay in the mix, so even if it sounds a bit harsh here, it might be what the mix needs. Okay, G multi, band 1 is not doing anything, band 2 is compressing shit tons. Oh yeah, we can see why. Band 2 here is compressing the snare hits. Once again, I'm still trying to get rid of the snare like this far in the chain. And you could see the cymbal noise was under this line up here. So the cymbals were not affected by this band outside the snare drum hits. But the snare drum is affected. So that's the beauty of using these tools. You can hit stuff with precision. And I guess this one does the same. Okay. And there's a limiter here. I guess this is for the snare drum hits. I'm pretty sure it is, to make it not peak. And the actual tracks themselves here, the recorded overheads, they don't have any effects at all. They're just panned left, right, hard panned, and then sent to the group. The drum verb here has SIR, the impulse response processor, written by Christian Knufinke. I probably pronounced his name really bad, but sorry, Christian. Here we have a bunch of impulses where I downloaded from the internet. They are free, all of them. By the way, everything I'm using is free. All the samples and stuff are free. So you can find these. You can just Google stuff. Google impulse responses. You will most of the time find your way to these popular impulses. There are like guys who put out really cool quality freeware stuff out there on the internet. That goes for plugins and samples. So just search. Here is a equalizer for the drum reverb, and apparently I did not want the reverb to be heard in these frequencies, only like in the attack, in the high frequency span, sort of. And a limiter on that to boost the volume, I guess. Threshold, -3, yeah. And to make sure the track does not clip. Okay, let's get to the fun stuff now, the bass guitar. I'm gonna start with the bass guitar itself. So I had a bass. I had borrowed it from a friend. It was a Yamaha bass. I don't recall the actual specifications, but I fed it directly into my Profire 2626 and then into Ampeg SVX here in Reaper. And I chose, I tried every different setting, every different amp model, and every different cab. There we go. I tried them all, just sort of found a sound I thought would fit my projects. I'm not gonna go, this is not an Ampeg tutorial, so I'm not gonna really go through that. Just showing you here the settings, which is, I used pretty low gain I did not want it to distort. So this is my clean channel, sort of. And everything is set pretty low here, actually. I guess I'm relying on post-processing or something. Yeah, the cabinet was... fuck it. The equalizer here is removing some of the mids to leave room for the vocals. I don't want the bass guitar to collide with Gustav's fundamental tone here. And the guitars. The guitars and the bass are not supposed to fight too much. The bass can easily fill up where the guitars shouldn't fill up. You know, you don't want the guitars to rumble through here on 100, 200 hertz. I mean, they should be there, but they should not rumble. The rumbling comes from the bass guitar. That's what it does best. So I'm using the bass guitar in this project as a support for the guitars. This is not a really bass guitar fancy music. It's not like I'm going bananas on the bass guitar and playing solos and shit. So this is just supporting the guitars and to make it fat. And I'm severely limiting the sound here, creating a like super compressed sound. And I have a compression here which is turned off. Apparently I used this one before this one, and then replaced the recomp with the limiter. Sometimes the limiter works better than a compressor, and sometimes it does not. So it depends on the material that's being processed. Let's listen to the bass without any effects. Okay, that was not without effects. That was with the distortion as well. Keep in mind, it's still the effects from the bass group track. So if we turn these off again as well. It sounds really good because the strings were fresh here. So you got the metallic sound on the strings, which is quite nice. And with these turned on, we can notice a drop in volume. If I turn everything off here, it's really loud, and the bass is loud, and everything is loud. And at a first impression, it sounds better, but in the project, it sounds really weird. And, well, let's try it. Okay, effects are turned off. Yeah, it actually sounds like it's distorting the mix, and it's disturbing other frequencies. It's disturbing the guitars and the kick drum, and it's sticking out in a way that it's not really in the mix. It's like a layer upon the mix, and that's not really the point of mixing. So here's the whole bass group with the distortion. It sounds really shitty. I can admit that. It sounds really, really, really fucking shitty. But I did want that in this project. I wanted a really fucking horrible bass sound. Like when you listen to it in its solo, it's just like, ew. But it adds a whole lot of grit and dirt to the mix, and I don't know, I guess it's a result of my previous cleanliness. I was like in the beginning of my mixing, my so-called mixing career, I was really clinical about everything. It was supposed to sound so clean and like perfect and precise, and then I went bananas on the bass guitar here just to get away from that. And yeah, I wanted a dirty and gritty bass. Here's where the distortion comes from. We got a EQ, removing some bass, compression, leveling out the signal. And this is the reason I'm leveling out the signal before the amplifier, is just to distort the whole fucking thing. I'm not looking to distort just the attacks and like not the sustain. That's the case if you have a very dynamic signal fed into an amp and you like play really hard and you set the gain to distort on the hard hits, it's not going to distort as much on the low soft hits. But this compressor makes sure every single fucking thing is getting distorted. It's like a carpet of distortion. I'm using Warp VST here, a really old guitar amp sim, and yeah, this is also the same amp sim I'm using for the guitars. So you're gonna see it soon. Settings here, 0 bass, mids, yeah, just to make it sound dirty. I got one impulse here from a internet friend who made this for me, which basically overrides this cab. Let's see. Yeah, I just tried which cab it was overriding, and it is indeed this one. These two sounded hollow, and that's because this impulse is not made to bypass those. This impulse mitigates the sound of this built-in cab. That's really bad with Warp VST. It cannot turn off its fucking cab simulation. So this one is like an anti-cab. It undoes this cab and makes the sound come out wet from the amp, and then I amplify here, or then I apply my own bass impulse, which is also from the internet. Ampeg 8x10 D6 mic, D6A107. Apparently I chose this one for the project. And a EQ to remove the bass, and some really annoying peak frequencies resulting from this insane distortion here. Let's turn this off. Yeah, and then turn it on. Yeah, it sounds like cleaner to me with this one on. On the other hand, if the whole point was to sound dirty. No, I'm just kidding. And then we got a limiter here. Yeah, okay, good. So the bass track is... I'm gonna solo the drums and the bass now. Maybe now you understand why I wanted it to sound like that. It does really fit with the drums, and like, it gives me like goosebumps. That's apparently how I sound when I get goosebumps. Okay, rhythm guitars. Wait, did I go through the bass guitar group folder? If I didn't, here's a compressor. Here's a multiband compression, just to tame the different parts of the spectrum independently. And some equalization, which looks like a mountain. Oh, I can ski here. Whoa, I died. And then there's an EQ, which does what? Oh yeah, this is just to automate. I'm automating this EQ here to for some part in the song later, when it's for the interlude or something. I don't know. So this one is not here for all songs. It's just in this song for automation. Okay, rhythm guitars. Let's go to first guitar here. The first one is a rhythm guitar left. Starts off with an equalizer, and hey, yeah, look at this shit. It's like Mount Everest. Here's the sea level. Huh, that's funny. The sea colored like turquoise. That's funny. Yes. Okay, can we like mature up? I'm just gonna have some water. Water. Yeah. So I'm starting off by cutting some rumble in the sub 50 hertz section. I'm adding some warmth here at 160, so the distortion gets a bit thicker. And then I'm adding 10 decibels at 1450 hertz. And this is to create the gent sound. But beware, this is not how you create the gent sound. Oh, sorry. This is not like a recipe to create a genty sound. And in my opinion, my guitar sound isn't even that genty. I mean, this is not gent. My music is not gent. It's actually, I am a big fan of gent, yes. And I'm inspired by gent sound. But this project is just It's like one foot in djent and the other foot is jumping around all other musical genres. But for my guitar, which is not a good guitar, it's just a cheap LTD LTD 250 MH, NT 250 MH, I think is the name of it, and it costs like, I don't know, $400 or $500. Not a really super guitar, but it sounds okay. I mean, I just slapped a EMG 81 in there, and yes, I know it's a boring mic. There are lots more funnier mics. But what do you do when you have a cheap guitar? You slap a fucking 81 in it. It's gonna make it sound like recordable, at least. It's not gonna be unique, but it's recordable. But since I'm using Warp VST here, I do have a more unique sound than every other 81 user in a cheap guitar who plays through a PV 5150 or something. I don't know. But I needed to boost the upper mids by quite a lot to get that djenty metallic sound when you like go bow on your low string. And a low pass to remove some hiss from the incoming signal so the amplifier doesn't go bananas and like whoosh. And here is a Tube Screamer clone from BTE Audio. Really good, works like a charm. I don't know if it sounds like the original or not. I don't really have a Tube Screamer, and I'm not that much of a analog guy, really. I hate material things and like, well, not hate, but I hate having a lot of material things. I don't want to drag around like 10 suitcases wherever I go, and I certainly don't want to drag around that shit when if I'm on tour or something. I'm all about, I mean, if something digital sounds good, then why the fuck not use it? I mean, it's really, I think it's what's the word? I don't know, but it's just stupid when people don't use digital gear simply because they're not analog. I mean, are you even considering the benefits and what it actually sounds like? I don't know. Maybe they don't. Anyway, enough of my rant. Analog versus digital. I'm all about both. I could use both if I just feel like it. I'm not locked to any, one of those. Anyway, so this is a clone of the Tube Screamer, and I'm driving up the tone here to 10, and the drive is at 0. The level is adjusted so that I don't distort too much into Warp VST. Because here's the thing, Warp VST acts really cool, and the character of the distortion changes when you change the gain. So it's not just adding more gain, it's changing like how it feels when you play the guitar, and the frequency response is also changed, and it sounds more smooshy and wet and warm at the setting of 12, and if you drag it down to like 3 and then you feed it with higher input level, it's gonna result in the same amount of distortion, but it's gonna be like a whole different type of distortion. And I guess this is how real amps work. So you can like choose to have maximum distortion in the preamp, and then adjust before your amp with a pedal or something to lower the gain so it doesn't distort too much, but just so you have that special character which comes from driving this knob up to maximum. Yeah, anyway, actually maybe we can just go listen to this. Pan this to center and solo. Okay, now I'm gonna drag the gain to like 2 and then adjust this level until I have like the same amount of distortion. that's not the same amount, so I'm gonna boost even further. I'm gonna put some gain from this EQ here, like say 6 more decibels. Okay, to me it sounds sort of roughly the same amount of distortion, but as you can hear, the sound is drastically different. It's very thin now. It has no warmth, no bass. It doesn't sound like smooshy and tight and dense as I think it does when it's on 12. Well, okay, listen again now. I'm gonna switch back to 12. Let's take it up to 3. Okay, quickly, 12, and then 350, 360, and 0. I mean, the difference is just massive. My first thought right now was, hey, this sounds like Gojira. From Mars to Sirius Business. From Mars to Sirius. That record is, I think it sounds like a huge cave. It sounds like they recorded that record in a huge cave with guitar amplifiers that are the size of like 10 mammoths stacked on top of each other. And yeah, their sound is pretty MIDI. And now, when we got back to my original sound here, it sounded pretty MIDI in comparison with the gain setting on 2. So my immediate response was like, oh hey, sounds like Gojira. Which is a good thing. I love Gojira. But yeah, you can see how big of a difference that has, the gain setting. So I guess that's a powerful tip from me to you guys. If you have an amp that you're happy with or unhappy with, play with the gain, just the gain, and leave everything at like 12 o'clock. And adjust the input volume instead and play with the gain for the character of the sound. And once again here we have the impulse that undoes this impulse, and then I have an impulse that slaps on top of that to get another cab. And this cab is Catharsis Awesome Time, the all-famous S-Press High cab impulse. And probably a bunch of you guys are cheering out there now. Woohoo! Catharsis, man! Yeah, he's cool. And yeah, he is. Ryan is really, really, really awesome and kind to provide us with high-quality impulses for free. And here's the EQ that comes after the cab, and it's just cutting out pretty steeply the bass, the rumble frequencies, and then just adjusting a little bit here for some presence and yeah, shaping off the excess noise on the track. I'm gonna go back and pan this left. Let's listen to both of these. I just gotta say, I love Warp VST. It sounds like no other amp, and for this project it really fits. People have provided me with reamps, with real good amps, triple rectifier, and also 5150. But they do sound good, but I was like, it doesn't fit my project. Why am I supposed to use a real amp just for the sake of being real? And people have commented on that, you know. Some people think, oh hey, this project would have sounded awesome if you were using real amps. But here's the funny thing, they don't specify why or what real amps they want me to use. They just say, use real amps. As if automatically a real amp would sound better. Well, I'm not sure a Behringer or Behringer 15 watts watt real amp would sound better than this. So just because it's real, or maybe they're not. Behringer was a really bad example, I guess. Let's go to the guitar group, and that consists of furthermore EQing to melt it with Gustav's vocals. I think this is for the vocals. Gustav has like a fundamental frequency tone of somewhere right here, and then he has his screams are peaking in this area. So I had difficulties in the mix where the guitars were fighting Gustav, and I had to like boost Gustav's volume by pretty big amounts, and the whole mix was just, something was wrong. So when you get to that point, when you can't get a good mix simply by adjusting volume, it's in the frequencies, and things are fighting for the same area. That's the case like when you have a band at your studio and I don't know, nobody is happy with the mix. Let's say the bass player wants more bass. He wants the bass track to go up in a few decibels, and then you have the guitar player coming in and saying, "Oh, hey, yeah, this sounds good, but pretty cool. But you should just adjust my guitar volume by 5 decibels or whatever." And then the drummer comes, "Oh yeah, but the snare drum is gone, so you could just boost that by 2 decibels." And you see here, it's a vicious circle, and it's never gonna end. If you do as the band says, then you're gonna have a mix that has been boosted overall by like 10 decibels, and you're gonna have clipping, and you're gonna have shitty mix. So if the band says things like that, I guess it's time to look into the individual tracks and try to make them not fight each other. If you can make the guitar audible at the same time as it's not overly loud in volume, and you can hear the singer, and you can hear the bass and stuff, and the drums and the snare is popping, well, then you got a good mix. And if you think that's good, then fuck what the band says, because they're gonna just want some more decibels, man. Hey, the bass guitar, yeah, you should boost it in volume, man. Fuck me, man, I'm a bass player. Here's the boot EQ MK2 again. It's booting some booting. Oh man, I need a break. It's boosting some highs here, and it's taking off some high mid frequencies and some mid frequencies, but not that much here. It's just taming the sound, making it still not fight with Gustav. Yeah. Some multiband for. Yeah, this one here is taming the band one, the bass band is taming the palm mutes so that I don't get like oomph, 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 when I'm going palm mutes on the guitar. So the rest is actually not doing anything. I'm just using this one band here to mute that. These grayed out areas here are actually where the compressor is working, and it's dampening those peaks. And those peaks were, well, you guessed it, the palm mutes. Yeah. Guitar left and right are exactly the same in the settings. So yeah, here's a thing. You should use like different settings to create a wider stereo image and better mono compatibility. But I decided not to. I think they're pretty much exactly the same, and I just thought it sounded better to my ears. But yeah, for my next project, for the next record, I'm gonna try using more different amps on different pannings to create more more variation and better mono compatibility. But I figured not a lot of people listen to stuff in mono today, and when I did mono check, I didn't think it sounded too horrible compared to bands like, well, when I was mixing this, I was comparing a lot to Sixth, Death of a Dead Day. That album is fantastic, and I was comparing to some other albums, but mainly that one. Raised Fists they have like a very powerful drum sound, and I love their drum sound, Raised Fists. You should definitely check that Swedish hardcore band out. Here's a lead guitar group channel which has nothing on it. It's just a volume control for all the leads, basically. There we go. Control E to collapse all the envelopes. Looks a bit cleaner. Here's a lead guitar channel, and there's some EQ with some warmth boost. This is to what am I using this for? It's for It's for well, when I'm sustaining a note, like on the thicker strings especially, by boosting this frequency, like the low mids, the mids, before the amp, it gives you a pretty thick and nice solid sustain. That's about how I can describe it. And it was just random how I discovered this. I was just playing around with pre-amp equalizers and sweeping back and forth, and I found like, oh, in this area it sounds really thick. It sounds much warmer, and it gave me better sustain and like a more pleasant sustain, sort of almost like a square sign, a square waveform type of sound. I really love that. And the gate, just to get rid of unwanted noise, nothing special. Warped VST, again with the same tactic here with 12 gain. Key 4 for the amp, for the cab bypass. And I'm going to talk like this, like very Swedish. And here I have the same. Here is Sickan's warp bypass. And the bypass is then bypassed. And there is another bypass going through here. No, I'm just kidding. This is a Catharsis Awesome Time Impulse. And I have equalizer. It's cutting out some bass and adding some it is removing some frequencies up here. And I have a reverb too. And it is a reverb for the lead guitar. Yes. Ja. Ja, det är mycket bra. Det är jättekul. Okay. And then I have the same setting for all the channels here. For the lead guitars. I have a lot of lead guitar channels here apparently. This one is a bit different. Oh shit, what's this? Let's see. It's this, this part. Oh, okay. It's here. So basically, I guess I wanted some, a lot of thickness and warmth because I was playing on a very light string there on the tapping thing, and it sounded pretty thin and like this. So I figured, why not just boost it? It doesn't really damage the sound. I'm not really adding so much noise in it, so the noise comes mostly from here if you add a lot in the highs. And this one is still for the genty sound, but why do you want genty sound on a tapping thing? I don't know, but apparently it was a good. Maybe it's just something I left from the previous preset. Often I'm just like making one good bass, not bass guitars, but bass sound for the guitars, a sound that I can use it as a template for future sounds. So I guess I just used that again and applied different settings on it to get my lead sound. Yeah. And we got some clean guitars. The clean guitars are here. Let's listen. That actually sounded out of tune on some part, but I guess maybe it's effects or something that I have. Okay, that's my clean chain, and surprise motherfuckers, I'm not using anything on my clean chain except like there's no amp simulation or cab simulation or anything. It's just a clean guitar right into my Profiler, and then it's just being compressed with some multibanding to gain control over the different frequencies. And I can tell you this: a clean guitar has a very dynamic frequency response. Some frequencies will protrude or like be very prominent while others are not there. So a multiband is really handy for a clean guitar, and single band normal compression just to even out the volume after the frequencies have been evened out. You can just even out the entire volume with a compressor, and then some effects. This one is free also, and it's a multi effect. I don't usually use multi effects. I try to like have one good delay plugin, and then after that I put in a like reverb or whatever I want. But here I just found this sort of preset, and I switched it up and played around with it, and found my own little setting for this clean guitar. And then they all go through this one with the Boot EQ MK2 again, my favorite EQ plugin for coloring the sound, not precise like notching out frequencies, but it's for coloring the sound. It's really awesome. And here's the settings for that if you still want the settings. I mean, the settings are pretty useless for you right now. It's just what's important is to keep track of like the method, what tools am I using, and for what reason. And an equalizer to filter out the excess noise that comes from the boost here when I color the sound, and from all the compression as well. When you compress, you also raise the noise floor. That's common knowledge. And sometimes you can cut frequencies out, and in this case with a clean guitar, these frequencies above here don't really add that much to the mix. Let's just check if there's actually anything there. Yeah, there is a lot of frequencies there, but as I said, they don't really contribute anything to the mix. So I'm just gonna leave it like that. I mean, I can still hear the attack, and it's fine. It's really fine. I don't want the clean guitars to pop out of the mix and like into the users, the listeners' ears with a like needle to punch a hole through your what's that thing called? Trumhinna in Swedish. Drum skin, pretty much, in your ear. The skin that receives the sounds and vibrates and makes the bones vibrate to produce electrical signals in the hairs, and you hear stuff. That's pretty cool.